Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Carrot Corner Easter sale special stream, and I am here with a former student of mine, actually, Steve, who's going to be showing us some of his 25 NL hands this morning. Let's meet Steve. How's it going?
I'm doing great, thank you very much. I've been playing since 2018, and I've been reading, all the books that were available. I'm playing from Hungary, so I apologize for my lack of English knowledge. So if I, say something that doesn't make sense, then just please ignore that.
Yeah,
But
I
other
mean,
than
you should
that,
probably have had breakfast this morning. It's not good to be playing hungry. Well, guys, if you're watching this on YouTube next week and you're thinking, man, I never heard about the Easter sale, I missed it, I didn't take advantage of it, I tell you what, we'll make a code, Easter, and we'll make that available for 2 days after this video comes out on YouTube, because there will be a YouTube version. Okay, so use code Easter for the 25% discount if you missed the official period of the sale. A lot of people find that when they do take cash injection in grade E and the more exploitative stuff, that they start having like a more notable spike in the short term in their results. Like usually the theoretical grades, they stem the bleed, they do make a difference in long term, they just transform people, but the exploitative stuff can have a bigger difference short term. So if you notice like any exploits in particular that have been really working well for you or have made a big impact since you took that exploitative content.
I use a lot of solver work, and one of the things that I think is pretty different compared to how people work is that like the bluffs are just not there most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that it was for me was really transformational to stop trying to call down in what I think is an optimal and a GTO way.
Uh-huh.
So that was really transformational for me.
Yeah, and you're fighting like your inner human demons when you're doing that as well, right? Because like the human brain like always wants to succumb to the sunken cost fallacy and not let go of the money that you've put in already. And I think no
Yeah,
matter
for
how
sure.
experienced you get, you still have like pangs of that. You still have like the twinge to the urge to go ahead and like call the rest off, even if it's a spot that's like grossly underbluffed, that you've been raised in the river or tripled or something like that in a tight configuration. So yeah, so the exploitative content will for sure help with that, and it'll also help on the aggressive side as well. But let's dive in. Chat's getting annoyed at my shilling. This is Easter. I mean I've got to shill a little bit for Easter, right? That's just what we do. Okay, so we go for an ISO here with pocket aces against cutoff limper, presumed weaker player. Yep, I'd absolutely bet the flop. I think this is good to just start pot growing. I would bet the turn again against a fish here. I think it's just a better play. Yep. And we get min raised. How do we feel about this spot with pocket aces when we get min clicked on the turn? What do we think the recreational player's range is like, and what should we do and how should we feel about it?
I just don't think in theory like this mint clicking is a thing, but I think recreational players could be doing this with all sorts of stuff. So I don't remember how I played the hand at the time. I don't think Jam is accomplishing that much.
I think it's accomplishing a great deal. I think it's accomplishing the demolition of your own EV and money.
Yeah, I mean that is true, especially with me like blocking all the potential like flush bluffs. So like I really hope I'm not jamming here, but I think it's a mandatory call.
Yeah, I think it's a call. Getting 4.75 to 1, needing 17% equity. I think we have the worst hand here more than we have the best hand. Villain has a straight or two pair or something like that, or a set, like pretty often in this spot. Not so much the set when they don't raise flop, but like the straight or the two pair or something. But I also think there's a load of like pair plus draw stuff they're overplaying. Just because you have the two aces that have the flush draw blockers doesn't mean that they can't have like the 10-9 of diamonds or some combo draw or something. And at this price and position, like, you definitely need to peel. But definitely there's a big difference between experiencing the misfortune of this happening to you, right, and your EV going down
Yeah.
considerably, and then being sucked into that misfortune like a whirlpool, and then like getting dragged into the black hole of like clicking the fold button instantly because you're so upset about it. So I don't think fold is remotely possible here yet, but the feeling that comes over you, if you had to encapsulate that feeling by one of your buttons, it would be the fold button, if that makes sense, right? So it's all too easy to
Yeah.
get dragged into wanting to just fold immediately here. Um, Dodako says overpair is great value. Barrel, when you get raised, it's even better to just insta-fold. I don't think when you get min raised that holds true because the pot odds are too good and the arm merges here. And I think for the price you can peel. But if you were raised bigger, I would definitely agree. But I think you just have to consider pot odds here. The game is asking you to obtain 17% of this pot by calling across all future branches of the game tree. And if you think you can do that, you can peel, right? So we do peel. The river is the 5 of clubs. Villain bet's really small. Man.
Pot odds are so good. I think it's an easy call. Even though we're going to be losing, I don't know, like 80% of the time, but we only need to be good 17% of the time. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's probably a crying call. I think raise is terrible because
yeah,
like you're asking a fish to fold 2 pair plus on this node.
not going to
And
happen.
yeah, I agree. It's not gonna happen enough. And fold is just like while you're usually losing, it's still possible that villain has like the pair plus draw hand that raised the turn and now doesn't know what to do and is just betting. Bet size equals hand strength. You have to remember here as well, if villain did have a flush or villain did have a straight, they're very often sizing bigger than this. So it's definitely a usually lose but call anyway sort of situation. And I think this is very illustrative of a skill the poker player needs to have, which is suck it up and don't enjoy it and usually suffer a bit but do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. Like how many times in life, Steve, how often do you have to do things that you don't really want to do? Like how many tasks are there that just need to be done and you just do it regardless of how
Quite
it makes you feel?
often,
Yep.
not quite often, but like it's if it needs to be done, it needs to be done.
Yeah, it's the same in my business as well. There's things that like I'd much rather not do, but like actually it's not a huge deal, and when it's done I know things are going to be better. So it's about this, like Peterson has this idea of like, well man, you have a covenant with yourself throughout time, you might say, huh? And by honoring that covenant you're looking out for the future versions of yourself, man. The you of just now is like looking after the various yous throughout the generations of time or whatever. And by like calling here and usually losing, you're kind of looking out for the you who has the best hand here 25% of the time or 20% of the time. You're like looking after that
Yeah,
guy. And knowing that normally when you call here, you're just donating another 17 big blinds to this guy's 2 pair. This guy probably just has Jack 9, and we're about to lose to that. But occasionally he doesn't, and I think it's enough that he doesn't that we go ahead and we call here. So yeah, Queen 10, Jack 9, Jack 8, 9 8. These are the maybe less so 9 8. But these are the kinds of things that will have the biggest impact on spots river nodes like this. Right, let's move on. 4-5, open, 3-bet small. What does this tell us, Steve? Who is this? What does it tell us about the human?
oh yeah, well, it's likely not an experienced player.
Yeah, so it's probably a fish, right? Let's just be blunt about it. This is going to be a weaker player. We're going to have a skill edge. I wouldn't say the range is necessarily super wide from the big blind. It's kind of easy to just call a lot of hands in the big blind, but it's fish sizing, as Monkey May I says, exactly. All right, half pot, and I'm just gonna call here and see what happens. Check, we check. Pot. What are we thinking here about villain's range? Any thoughts on whether we should call this?
I think this is a decent call to have. I mean, we've already established that the opponent is going to be a weaker player, so I think his range is going to include a lot of overcards that have, like bricked on the river, and this being a scattered aggression line. I would think that there are, plenty of bluffs that we beat. So I think a call is not too bad.
Yeah, we definitely can say that like the bigger hands pre-flop in some players' games are likely to go bigger and the smaller hands go smaller. That's true of some fish, right? It's not true of all fish. So it does. It's one of these like diluted population reads that applies to some of the population but not others. And so we take it with a pinch of salt or with a grain of sand. As was it Helmuth that said that recently? We need to take this with a grain of sand.
Not sure.
It's kind of hilarious. I'm really like attacking Helmuth on this stream. I better stop it. So I think the argument about villain having like potential air combos here is reasonable. Like I can see some broadways and stuff that are just air here, like King Jack, King Queen. But let me ask you this: even though scattered aggression is generally an overbluff thing in general, and even though we should usually be calling our bluff catchers against scattered aggression from weaker players, what do you think about the sizing here? Like, is there anything that tells you?
I would consider this to be a stronger range if, like, if he were to have a value hand, he would be using this size as well. So
Yeah, and also less bluffs go into this size than smaller bets in general with fish. Now there are fish that bluff this size, but there are others who will bluff smaller and value bet bigger because they're greedy for value. So I think the spot is okay to call in. I don't think it's like as amazing as a single raise pot call down against scattered aggression because we know from
for
data
sure,
that 3-bet pot scattered aggression is not as overbluffed at all, not even close
because
as
they
a single
already
raise pot.
filtered quite a lot. So
Right, it's just less like airless it's less showdown valueless combos to go for it with. I do think the biggest data point here though is that you have a node that's really rare for a recreational to slow play on, which is the turn. Like it's very rare for recreational players to check the turn and go for the check raise. It's not rare for a reg to do that, right? Necessarily, especially as you go higher, because check
yeah,
jam is a very good line on a turn like this with an overpair at some frequency. Like it's okay. But recreational players, when there's a 10 and a 9 out there, are likely to like pot the turn with an overpair or just do something that's like draw fearing instead of actually going for the check raise. So I definitely think we should call river. We unblock all bluffs. It's a scattered line, and I think it's a wet texture. The wetter the turn is, the more likely, and I mean this in a draw sense, not a made hand
yeah,
sense, the more
yeah, yeah.
drawy the turn is, the more we can make the read that recreational players are unlikely to actually check the turn with a good hand. So I am going to call the river here, but I also understand that against pot, I am doing way less well like than I am against half pot or 2/3 pot. Okay, go.
And this is, I think, a terrible bluff to have, by the way. So the
Yep.
fact that he is bluffing this on the river is an indication that this guy is probably over bluffing everything else. So I think I may have marked this guy as well.
Yeah, and that's only useful going forward. It's not, and I know you probably know this, Steve, but for the audience's sake here, it's not a good thought process. And you hear this a lot in poker when people say villain bluffed this hand, so the call was great. That's a really bad thought process because what you're doing there is you're taking. I mean, it might be factually true that the call was really winning against that human, but it wasn't useful to your decision because you couldn't access that he had ace queen of spades at the time you were making your call. So yeah, in future, absolutely, as you say, Steve, mark the guy maniac, spewy, uses big sizing as a bluff. These are all good things to use. Scattered aggression, pot sizing equals bluff. That kind of thing is good things to note down. But what you don't want to say is like, oh yeah, so it would have been terrible to fold against this guy. It's like, yeah, that might have
Sure.
been true, but we didn't know who that person
No, no,
was
no.
at the
What
time.
what I what I meant to say was that in game I take a lot of notes on the opponent. So
I know.
right now I'm sometimes like I'm trying to figure out what's going on because the names are hidden from me as well. So it is possible that I already had notes on this guy and that
Mm-hmm.
made my decision easier. But what you
Mm-hmm.
were saying makes like absolute sense.
Yep. Yep. Do 6-3. We check back. 5 comes. I like to check on this board. I think we should be checking a lot. I think you have to call ace 10 to this sizing. Interesting. So what's Villain saying they have, and to what extent do we believe or disbelieve the value?
Well, he's definitely saying that he has something. And I think I remember this hand that I think I may have called, and I think it has to do with who the opponent was. But from a theoretical perspective, I think again ranges are pretty wide here. There are plenty of bluffs that villain could have, especially after playing like this, like very small bet on the turn and then huge bet on the river.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I may have called here, but I'm not sure.
You're certainly not a man that's afraid of calling with bluff catchers, Steve will give you that. And that's actually a good trait because you're not locked
Yeah.
into your absolute hand strength at all. You're not like, oh, I would call if I had a 6, but I'm not going to call ace X. You're actually asking the right question, which is, how easy would this be to be overbluffed? Now, this is quite pool dependent and stake dependent. So I think the higher up you go, the better the call becomes here for sure. I think at
Yeah, I
25s,
agree.
it's kind
I
of
agree
dicey
for
because
sure.
people are a bit allergic to just overbet bluffing in general on the river. Um, the small turn bet is kind of curious, like for sure. And it used to be a mass data line where people were told, I think it was like Detox or something, they were told to like block, turn, jam, river, and like every time someone did that on Ignition in like 2022, they were bluffing, and like the people who knew about it that I coached were printing by just calling there,
Mm.
and I was fully endorsing it. Then things changed and the meta shifted, but this is just a different kettle of fish because it's 25 NL. Yes, villain could just have Jack 10 or Jack 9 or some random bluff, but it's also very easy to have value here because all you need to have is like some kind of set or straight combo, and it's kind of easy to have a bunch of those as well. I don't know. I don't. I am a bit suspicious. I am a bit suspicious because this sizing is probably sizing this pool mainly just takes with a 4 and doesn't take with that many like 2 pair of sets or whatever. And for that reason, I don't hate calling here at all.
Yeah,
Also,
I think I may have let it go. I can't. I'm not sure.
yeah,
I think I may have let it go.
we did call, which I'm not surprised to see because
Mm.
you're a fan. You're a fan of the call button.
Yeah, I just can't let go. I can't find a fold button.
I feel you. I'm a bit like that too. I like stationing. The thing that's bothering me a bit in this spot, to be bluffing, villain needs to just be leading turn with like a random combination. And that could easily be happening because this is such a great board for them and you check back flop and stuff. But I don't know, man. 25 and L, you can probably fold here, honestly. I think the higher I go, the more I'm just definitely calling this spot, though. One thing I will
Yeah,
say, though, is that player type is everything here. So, like, if this is a reg that you've seen bluffed, this is, like, wildly over bluffed. And if
that's why
this
I'm
is,
not
like, a
sure.
fish, then, yeah.
That's why I'm not sure because I don't see the name. Okay, so boards. Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't tell us whether your call's right or not. I just think that against too many
Sure.
people in this pool, there are no bluffs at this sizing. And then, like, the
Uh,
guys who do bluff enough are over bluffing, but then are there enough of them? That's kind of the concern, right?
right.
So, ISO here. Button versus limper. Small blind comes along, peels. We go 3 ways on King Jack 9 rainbow. It goes check, check, and we go for small. And we get raised.
Already not happy about the raise.
What are we doing on the flop, Steve? We face this raise. This is 3-way, and this is small blind raising you here. On a flop that was
Yeah.
3-way. But before we see the rest of this hand, what are we doing on the flop?
Well, we're not happy about this, but I think we're going to call regardless. I mean, there's still some value that we are beating, like mainly king queen or stuff like that. I think calling on the turn and evaluating on the river is an option.
So when you get check raised in this spot, I think the chances that a hand you beat or check raising you is check raising you here is very, very slight in this pool.
Yeah,
I think you're
sure.
already dead here, as in like you need to draw to like running 4-4 to outdraw Jack 9 or running straight or ace, and even then there's Queen 10 still beating you. I think you're drawing close to dead here, like very often. And
Yeah,
I would just fold the flop. Like you have a pair with no redraw. I'd rather call like not that this is that relevant, but I'd rather call Jack 10 by far.
makes
And I
sense.
and I wouldn't want to call Jack 10. Now you might be right that there's a few merges that like some recreational player raises with King Queen here, but I don't think that's a problem. I think we can allow for the fact that when we fold the flop here, we're exploiting like 90 something percent of the pool hard, and then we're like making a mistake against like some people who are like merging too much. But even if they have Queen Jack and they're raising here, it's not like we're miles and miles ahead. Like we're a considerable favorite, but we're not like
Yeah,
crushing.
no, for
So
sure.
I think like to start to summarize your game a bit here, Steve, from what I'm seeing from these hands, if you fold when you're unsure, you'll start to do really well. Like if you start to fold just when the call doesn't feel amazing to you, you will correct that bias, and that's what I would recommend you try to do over the next few weeks. Is just to say any spot at all where I feel like I kind of want to call, but I don't love it, but I'm probably going to end up calling because that's what I do. I would like you to fold in that spot because I
Makes
think some
sense.
of your calls have been good today and some of them are costly. I think when we get to the turn and face this, we should fold as well, just for the same reason that the merges are now. They're having to jump through more hoops to do this, right? So if Villain did have ace 10, he's just had, you block that heavily, but he's just had to jump through another hoop to
Yeah,
actually be able to bluff here. Villain has king queen, he's had to like not just check raise top pair here, which is a bit weird, but then like bet the turn like a relevant size with it as well. It just feels like it's too many hoops to jump through. Again,
yeah,
our
no,
hand is
it's
dead when we're losing, so this is a
sure.
fold on every node.
Yeah, I don't really want to see river.
Well, you need to take accountability for it. I know you
I
don't.
know.
I get it.
Yeah, I know.
You don't
Yeah,
want to see it, but this
yeah,
is the time in the show where you realize that this will keep happening unless you take full accountability. And that might mean sitting in whatever feeling comes across you, because your face, changes a little bit there when you say, I don't want to look at this, and you start sweeping that under the rug. You start like trying to say, let's just move on. And I want to force you to come back here, and I want to let you sit in the mud here, and I want you to feel the mud and how bad it feels, and I want you to then avoid it in future. Right? So let's sit in the mud, let's dwell here together. Let's just sit with this feeling. Let's have this on screen. Let's have chat looking at it. This is tough love
yeah.
right
I'm
here.
just gonna We're just gonna soak this all up.
We're gonna soak it up. Exactly. We're gonna actually like pay attention to how we're feeling as well
Mm,
together. There you go. This call is losing money.
thank
It's
you.
a bad call. No, I don't want you guys to be mean. I want you to be factual.
It's all good. I mean, I can take it. I don't mind. It's just, if it's a bad call, it is a bad call.
Station that you can improve.
There you
Exactly.
go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
Great. So
Nice.
we're sitting with this because we
Yeah.
want to remember it and we want to learn a lesson from it. And we might ask ourselves, why do we experience pain? Why do we
Yeah.
have that? Why do we experience discomfort or like negative emotions? What's their evolutionary function?
Well, so that we avoid doing the stuff that caused it
Hmm.
pain in the first place.
So pain's incredibly useful. So in my mind,
Sure.
the
Yeah.
modern movement, sort of postmodernist movement to like make everything comfortable and nice and pain free, it's great to reduce pain. Like penicillin's a good thing, you know. Like don't get me wrong, general anesthetics for surgery are a really good thing.
Mm.
Unnecessary pain should be reduced, right? And there's lots of ways we do that now, but general daily negative feedback is very important and can be used and channeled in a way that's extremely productive. So I think the more we actually accept ourselves, like for our shortcomings, and just sit in the negative feedback for a minute and just be one with it, the more we're likely to be like, right, that's part of me now. I've internalized that. I've soaked it up, and I've soaked it up in a positive way rather than going like, oh, I need to recoil from it. So it's really important. So we're getting the message across here, Steve, that folding is the next thing you need to unlock. Like if you can unlock folding in
Sure.
spots where you're like not doing well, like I know you've been making strides there, but yeah, we're gonna do a lot better. We called here and we lost. Probably. Oh my god, he actually had the king queen. Wow.
Still
Yeah,
a
so
bad
this
call.
time, yeah, it's still a bad call, but this time, we get it through. It's hard though when you make that call and you're shown that kind of news. It's quite difficult not to want to say, "Oh, that was a good call. I knew they had king queen. I knew there was a merge." See, like Steve called it. That is such a dangerous thought process. Villain doesn't
Yeah.
know what they're doing here. Villain is just spewing. Like Villain has got himself into a mess because he's added one and one together and got 10 on the flop with his pair and gutter, and then he doesn't understand what's happening and he's lost in the woods. And sometimes that will happen. That the Margie monkey, as Monkey May I says, does make an appearance. So king eight, check check. We hit the turn here. And oh my god, we just faced another. Yeah, this is a this
This
is a probe this time rather than a delayed c bet.
this hand has been haunting me
Mm-mm.
a long time, and I have history with this player. So what you're about to see is
What's
is
the
tainted
history?
by that.
Fill us in.
No, I think he's an aggressive regular, and I think he's a decent player. I think
Okay.
he has enough bluffs this particular line, so you will
Yep.
see what happens.
Yep. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if you think he's good and he's capable, then you can call
Yeah.
here with this combo. This is a pure call in theory.
Yeah, I think in theory it is a pure call, and I thought that this particular play, this one I remember, like vividly because I know what this is.
Mm.
I was like, there's no way I'm folding, two pair on this one. In this board, plenty of missed, plenty of bluffs to have, missed draws, whatever. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Yeah. Okay. I think this is just again like it's always worth pointing out that at 25 and L, like this line is really bad news against most people. But if you do
no,
have a very
absolutely agree.
specific
Like if
read, then all right.
Yeah, sure. Like if this was a random player, like I would be pitching this hand for sure. But against this particular opponent, like I am fairly certain that he's capable of doing this with bluffs and quite possibly enough bluffs. So that's why I was like, this
Mm-hmm.
is this is something that I have to call,
I,
especially
I
because I'm like
wonder, do we ever beat value? I don't think so for this sizing on the river. I think we have a bluff catcher, right? For this size, it's like 7
yeah,
5 in sets, probably. It's the value region. Yep.
yeah, 6-8. I mean,
I feel like 6 eight's a really bad jam. I think it's too thin. Okay, so Jacks, we go for the misclick, villain calls.
yep, that's that. Like that would be
That's the line you chose.
yes, but yeah, that should definitely be like a bigger three bet.
So what you're.
Again, I mean, even if it's a short stack, I'd three bet to like like 9 or 10 big blinds for sure.
Yeah, I don't really mind. What's your thoughts on flop then?
I mean, had I played this correctly and three bet pre with a normal size against a normal like a full stack, this would be close to a range check for me, I
Hmm.
think. Like this is a pretty bad flop for the pre-flop out of position three better, I think. So I'm very likely checking with a very high frequency on this particular flop, and like calling versus a 33% stab from the big blind, which he should be doing often, I think.
Yeah, I think with this stack size, like you can just be a bit more. I think like what you're doing overall, Steve, is that you're undervaluing value betting and you're overvaluing calling. Like that would be my like overall diagnosis of where your game's at the moment.
I
Because
think that's accurate. Yeah.
I think here, like we can definitely value bet. Now I know that the flop is not amazing and we would want to check it at high frequency in theory, but we're against a random short stack fish, and I'm not at all opposed to check raising the flop with this hand because while we lose to 10-9, while we lose to
Mm.
Jack 10, we also block it heavily. While we lose to a set, it's not that many combos. And people are going to bet get in 10s here and 6s and 9x and all sorts of stuff. So I
Mm.
don't actually mind just check raising here rather than check calling. In fact, I think it's better at 50 big blinds. I
Check
think when
jamming,
you
you mean?
get check jamming, yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, okay. Yeah,
I don't.
that's. I think I could live with that too. I don't.
You're also cleaning up a lot and you have redraw when behind, so like check jam just seems really nice here if the pot's a bit bigger. Even at this SBR, check raise, get it in is fine. Bet's probably
Sure.
okay as well. As played, I think the check's fine on turn. And on river, yeah, I mean, I guess we should probably bluff catch this spot.
Yeah.
Yep.
There we go.
I think just to start to wrap this up and bring this to a close, I get the sense upon reviewing your hands that folding's not very accessible for you in this session that we're looking at here. I feel like you didn't have much access to a fold button here because I've not filtered for river calls, I don't believe. I don't think I have. They're not going to see this, by the way, when I pull up this window because they're just seeing one window. But I'm
Yep.
just seeing what filter I have on. Yeah. Oh, I do have called river bet on. That explains it. That's why folding wasn't
Well, there
accessible to
you
you,
go.
Steve.
Well, there you go.
It's not just that every single hand was a call, but we accidentally filtered for the right thing
Well,
because
there
this
is
is the
every.
thing
Yeah,
you're
I mean,
working
every
on.
single hand is a call if you filter for it. That's true.
That
Yeah.
is true. So, that said,
Okay.
while most of
Yeah.
those calls were fine, some of them weren't so good. So let's work on folding more. We have actually diagnosed like the river call thing here today without even knowing the filter was on. It's kind of funny. Right, guys. So we'll wrap this up here, Steve. This has been great. Thank you for coming on the show and for looking at these facing river bet spots. I hope this has shed some light for you guys on how to think about the river and how to approach bluff catching in general. And yeah, we'll keep in touch, mate. Let us know how you're doing, and yeah, we'll have you back on in the future, I'm sure.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me, and goodbye, Chad. You have a good day, and enjoy golf.
I will
Take
try. I'm
care.
really bad at golf, but I'll do my best. All right, guys, take it easy. Remember, carrotcorner.com, 25% off until Easter Monday. Have a great Easter. Have a great weekend. Bye bye for now.